For 19 years, Carmen Vasquez has navigated the treacherous border highways with the same tactical precision she once commanded special reconnaissance teams in Afghanistan. But when she refuses to transport hidden packages for Los Halcones, a brutal cartel terrorizing the small town of Santa Elena, what begins as a routine cross-border delivery quickly turns into a dangerous standoff in the scorching Sonoran Desert. Stranded with sabotaged brake lines and surrounded by cartel vehicles, Carmen makes one phone call, not to 911, but to a number she's kept for decades, connecting to her military past and a promise made long ago. What Los Halcones don't realize is they've picked the wrong woman to intimidate, and by the time this desert confrontation ends, their iron grip over the borderlands will face its most formidable challenge yet. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The midday sun beats down mercilessly on Carmen Vasquez's custom Kenworth as it thunders down Highway 2, the international route running parallel to the US-Mexico border. A powerful machine moving with practiced precision through the unforgiving desert landscape. Inside the cabin, Carmen adjusts her worn military cap and scans her mirrors with the hyper-awareness of someone who spent most of her adult life in high-threat environments. At 46, her face bears the marks of someone intimately familiar with both desert sun and hardship. Her dark hair, streaked with premature silver, is pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her eyes, deep brown and unnervingly alert, carry the vigilance of someone who's seen far more than highways in her lifetime. The dashboard holds two photographs secured with yellowing tape. One shows a teenage boy with Carmen's determined jawline and quick smile. The other captures a younger Carmen in desert camouflage, standing beside four other soldiers against the backdrop of jagged Afghan mountains. Their expressions serious, but with the unmistakable bond of people who face death. Together, 19 years hauling freight, Carmen mutters to herself, checking her GPS. 7 years before that with Army intelligence. The roads change, but trouble stays the same. She glances at her manifest. The legitimate cargo, medical equipment bound for a hospital in Tucson, is right on schedule. 240 miles down, 180 to go. She'll cross back into the United States at Nogales if the border wait times hold steady. The delivery window is tight, but Carmen Vasquez has never missed a deadline. Not when sandstorms hit, not when roads washed out, not even when bureaucratic red tape threatened to strand her for days at checkpoints. The "Welcome to Santa Elena" sign appears ahead. Population 4,125 according to numbers that look recently updated, unusual for a small border town. Nestled in a valley surrounded by imposing mountain ranges, Santa Elena sits at a strategic crossroads of major transport routes between Mexico and the United States. Most truckers pass through without stopping, but today, Carmen needs fuel, food, and to rest her eyes after 10 straight hours behind the wheel. She eases the massive truck into Descanso del Camionero, Trucker's Rest, a sprawling truck stop on the town's outskirts. The place has a prosperous look that seems at odds with the struggling economy visible in the rest of the region. Fresh paint on the buildings, new concrete in the parking area, and a bustling restaurant with what appears to be expensive security cameras mounted discreetly at every corner. Carmen parks with the efficiency of someone who's done it thousands of times, sets the brake, and climbs down from the cab. She stretches, feeling the familiar tightness across her shoulders, then locks the truck and heads inside, instinctively noting potential exits and blind spots, habits from another life that she's never abandoned. The restaurant portion of the truck stop has an artificially cheerful atmosphere. Too clean, too orderly for a border establishment catering to long-haul drivers. The walls are decorated with generic landscapes rather than the local photography or trucker memorabilia typical of these places. Nearly every table is occupied. Despite the odd mid-afternoon hour, locals mixed with truckers, all speaking in the hushed tones of people accustomed to being overheard. Behind the counter, a young waitress with nervous eyes looks up as Carmen enters. "Buenas tardes," she says with a practiced smile that doesn't reach her eyes. "Seat yourself anywhere." Carmen chooses a booth with a clear view of both the entrance and her truck outside. The waitress approaches with a menu and a pot of coffee. Her name tag reads Lucia. "First time through Santa Elena?" Lucia asks, filling Carmen's cup without asking. "Just passing through," Carmen confirms, warming her hands around the mug. "Need to refuel, both the truck and myself." "Chef makes good enchiladas," Lucia offers, her voice carefully neutral. "Popular with drivers." Carmen studies the young woman's tense posture. "Sounds perfect," she says. As Lucia heads toward the kitchen, Carmen surveys the other patrons. Few scattered truckers hunched over plates. Two men in business attire incongruous for the setting. A family with tired children picking at their food. Normal border town scene, until the door swings open. Three men enter, their presence immediately changing the atmosphere. The family falls silent. One of the truckers suddenly finds his coffee fascinating, and the businessmen straighten almost. Imperceptibly, the leader, lean and muscular with a precisely trimmed goatee and calculating eyes, scans the room before settling his gaze on Carmen for a beat too long. "Buenas tardes, señores," Lucia says, her smile tightening slightly as she emerges from the kitchen. "Your usual table is open." The leader nods, guiding his companions to a corner booth with clear sightlines to both the entrance and Carmen. All three wear expensive casual clothes. Designer jeans, silk shirts open at the collar, gold watches that catch the light with every gesture. The smallest wears a shoulder holster partially concealed by his linen jacket. What marks them isn't their attire, but the respect tinged with fear they command. As they pass, conversations pause, eyes lower, and staff materialize with unasked-for service. These are men accustomed to deference, to immediate compliance with unspoken demands. Lucia delivers Carmen's enchiladas, her movements efficient but her eyes wary. "Anything else you need, Senora?" "This looks great, thanks," Carmen says, picking up her fork while maintaining peripheral awareness of the three men. A lifetime reading threat environments has taught her when to attract attention and when to blend into the background. This moment calls for the latter. An elderly truck driver with a weathered face and a faded Pemex cap catches her eye from two tables away. He gives a subtle nod of professional recognition, which Carmen returns with a small smile, understanding the silent communication of the road. We see each other. As Carmen finishes her meal, she feels a presence at her table. The leader of the three men stands too close, deliberately invading her space. His companions remain seated but watch attentively. That Kenworth outside, "It's yours?" he asks, examining her truck keys on the table. Carmen takes a deliberate sip of coffee before answering. "It is." "Beautiful machine," he says with a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. "American registered. You cross frequently?" "When the contracts Require it? Dangerous business, crossing borders these days, he observes, sliding uninvited into the seat opposite her. Especially for a woman alone, I manage, Carmen responds evenly. He extends his hand. Alejandro Vega. I oversee transportation. Security in this region? Carmen doesn't take the offered hand. Didn't know highways needed private security these days. A flash of annoyance crosses Vega's face, quickly masked by a cold smile. In these troubled times, everyone needs protection. Independent operators especially face difficulties. Mechanical issues, route problems, unexpected delays at checkpoints. The threat is thinly veiled. Carmen has encountered men like Vega before, in truck stops, in border towns, in combat zones. Different contexts, same predatory manner. I appreciate the concern, she says, sliding out of the booth and standing at her full height. At 5'9", she's eye level with Vega, and her posture communicates she won't be intimidated. But I've handled my share of road troubles for 19 years. Vega steps closer, the professional veneer slipping. Los Halcones provides valuable services for transporters through our territory. A modest monthly contribution ensures those troubles stay away. Consider it insurance. 5,000 pesos keeps your rig safe for one crossing. Carmen puts cash on the table for her meal, adding a generous tip for Lucia. My insurance is with Progressive, but thanks for the offer. This isn't an offer, Vega says, his voice lowering. It's how things work here. Ask anyone. Lucia watches anxiously from behind the counter. The elderly trucker has stopped eating and sits perfectly still. The restaurant has fallen silent. Then, I'm changing how things work, Carmen says, meeting Vega's gaze directly. Now excuse me, I've got a schedule to keep. For a moment they stand at an impasse. Vega finally steps aside with exaggerated courtesy, but his eyes have gone hard. Safe travels then. Roads around here can get very lonely, very quickly. Carmen exits the diner feeling their eyes on her back. She walks to her truck with practiced calm, her senses heightened. She makes a mental note of the vehicles in the parking lot. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows parked in a formation that would allow for quick departure or pursuit. Inside her cab, she locks the doors and takes a deep breath. She glances at the photo of the teenage boy and touches it briefly. Not getting dragged into anything today, Miguel, she murmurs. Her son doesn't need more worry while he's finishing his senior year. Engineering school is stressful enough without his mother getting into trouble on the road. As Carmen pulls out of the truck stop, she notices Vega and his men watching her from the diner entrance. In her side mirror, she sees 2 of the black SUVs starting up. Coincidence, maybe, but Carmen doesn't believe in coincidences, not after what she's seen and done. On the highway heading north toward the border, Carmen's truck thunders steadily onward. The terrain grows more rugged as the road begins to climb. Into the mountains, saguaro cacti and scrub vegetation dot the landscape, and the afternoon sun casts long shadows across the asphalt. In her mirrors, Carmen spots the 2 black SUVs maintaining a consistent distance behind her. Not approaching, just following, making their presence known. She checks her fuel gauge. 3/4 full, enough to drive straight through to the border without stopping again if needed. She reaches for her satellite phone, a premium expense she's never regretted for these remote routes where cell service is unreliable. Crossroads base, this is Desert Runner, she says into the handset, using the call sign from her transport. Company's protocol, radio check over, static, then a response. Desert Runner, this is Crossroads. Reading you 5x5, What's your status? Currently on Highway 2, about 40 miles south of Nogales. Just checking road conditions ahead. Over. Highway is clear all the way to the border, Desert Runner. Standard 2-hour wait time at customs. You hauling perishables? Negative, Crossroads. Medical equipment, priority clearance arranged. Just being cautious. I've picked up some unwanted attention from the local hospitality committee. A pause on the line. The dispatcher understands the coded reference to cartel presence. Copy that, Desert Runner. Keep standard protocols. Check in at 30-minute intervals. We'll be listening. Appreciate it, Crossroads. Desert Runner out. Carmen replaces the handset and checks her mirrors again. The SUVs maintain their distance, neither approaching nor falling back, making a statement, letting her know she's being watched. She knows their game. Intimidation first, then escalation if the target doesn't comply. She's seen it before, both here and in Afghanistan, where local warlords employed similar tactics against transport convoys. Different terrain, same predatory logic. What they don't know is that Carmen Vasquez has never been one to fold under pressure. Not when her reconnaissance unit was pinned down by Taliban fighters in the Korangal Valley. Not when border bandits hijacked 3 trucks from her convoy near Ciudad Juarez 5 years ago. And certainly not now, with Los Halcones testing her. Resolve. She checks her watch. 3 hours to the border if traffic remains light. 3 hours to determine whether this is merely intimidation or something more dangerous. Either way, Carmen Vasquez is prepared. She always is. The U.S. Border Patrol agent examines Carmen's paperwork with practiced efficiency, comparing the cargo manifest to the sealed medical equipment containers visible on her truck's flatbed. "Purpose of your crossing today, Ms. Vasquez?" he asks, despite having her regular carrier documentation in hand. "Medical equipment delivery to Tucson University Hospital," Carmen responds evenly, accustomed to the ritual questioning. The agent reviews her passport and commercial driver's credentials, then runs a UV light over various security features. "You cross frequently on this route, every 2 weeks usually, certified for fast program crossing." She refers to the free and secure trade program that expedites processing for pre-approved commercial drivers. The agent nods, then pauses, studying something on his computer screen. "Please pull into secondary inspection, Bay 3. Carmen's tension ratchets up slightly, though her expression remains neutral. Secondary inspection isn't uncommon, but after the confrontation with Los Halcones, any deviation from routine raises concern. "Is there a problem with my documentation?" she asks. "Just follow standard procedure, ma'am. Bay 3. The agent's tone leaves no room for discussion. Carmen guides her truck to the designated inspection area, a covered structure with inspection pits allowing agents to examine vehicle undercarriages. As she parks and shuts down the engine, she notices unusual activity. More agents than typical for a routine secondary check, several with K9 units. She climbs down from the cab, keeping her movements deliberate and non-threatening. A senior agent approaches, clipboard in hand. "Carmen Vasquez," he confirms. "I'm Supervisor Rodriguez. We need to conduct a thorough inspection of your vehicle." "May I ask why?" Carmen keeps her tone respectful but firm. "I've been crossing with fast certification for 3 years without incident." Rodriguez hesitates, then lowers his voice. "We received intelligence about potential contraband in a vehicle matching your truck's description. Crossing at this time. The implications register immediately." "Los Halcones," Carmen says, not a question. Rodriguez's eyebrows lift slightly. "You're familiar with the organization?" Had an encounter with them in Santa Elena about 4 hours ago when I refused to pay their transportation security fee. Their leader, Alejandro Vega, threatened to report me for smuggling. The supervisor studies her face, weighing her words. That's consistent with the tip we received. Anonymous call claiming cocaine, hidden in a Kenworth driven by a female trucker. Carmen nods grimly. Figured they might try something like this. I'm happy to cooperate with your inspection. The cargo is legitimate, sealed medical equipment with proper documentation from the manufacturer. We'll need to verify that, along with checking all compartments and storage areas, Rodriguez explains. It may take several hours. I understand, Carmen says, though the delay threatens her delivery schedule. Would it help to know I had an escort to the border? Sombra Security, their CEO, Javier Soto, can vouch for me. Rodriguez's expression changes subtly at the mention of Sombra. Soto's people were with you? That's interesting information. Still need to complete our inspection, but I'll make a call. As the Border Patrol conducts their search, Carmen waits in a small, air-conditioned office building adjacent to the inspection area. Through the windows, she watches as agents with mirrors and detection equipment methodically examine every compartment of her truck. K9 units circle the vehicle, sniffing for contraband. The medical equipment containers are opened and thoroughly inspected. 2 hours into the process, Rodriguez returns. Your cargo checks out, and we found nothing suspicious in any compartment. Javier Soto confirmed your account of events in Santa Elena. He's apparently well connected with our agency leadership. That sounds like Javier, Carmen responds. He builds relationships everywhere. What happens now? You're cleared to proceed, Rodriguez says, handing back her documentation. But you should know, this crossing might be problematic for you in the future. Los Halcones have been known to place associates on both sides of the border. Even with unsuccessful attempts like today's, they can create endless hassles for drivers. They target, suggesting I find another route, Carmen asks. The supervisor's expression remains professionally neutral. Just sharing information. Drive safely, Ms. Vasquez. Back in her truck, Carmen checks the time, 6:45 p.m. The inspection has cost her another 2 hours, pushing her scheduled arrival in Tucson to around 9 p.m. She calls the hospital's receiving department to notify them of the delay, then contacts her dispatcher. Crossroads, this is Desert Runner. Successfully cleared border, proceeding to delivery point with approximately 2-hour delay over. Copy that, Desert Runner, the dispatcher responds. Reason for delay? Carmen considers her answer carefully. Unexpected secondary inspection at border crossing. Situation resolved. Will provide details in my written report. Understood. Safe. Driving. The highway stretches before her into the gathering darkness, the familiar route offering some comfort after the day's tensions. Arizona's desert landscape differs little from that of Sonora on the Mexican side. Same saguaro cacti, same rugged mountains on the horizon, same expansive sky now painted with sunset colors. But crossing the border always brings a subtle sense of shifting realities. Different jurisdictions, different risks, different rules. Carmen activates her truck's powerful headlights as night falls completely. The traffic thickens as she approaches Nogales, Arizona, then thins again as she continues. North toward Tucson. She maintains a vigilant watch on her mirrors, scanning for any vehicles that might be following her, but sees nothing suspicious. An hour into the U.S. side of her journey, Carmen pulls into a well-lit truck stop just outside Green Valley. While Her truck doesn't need fuel. She needs to stretch her legs and reassess her situation. The border crossing's secondary inspection has left her unsettled, Vega's reach apparently extending further than she'd anticipated. Inside the truck stop's diner, she orders coffee and a sandwich to go. While waiting, she scans the room out of habit. 4 other truck drivers scattered at various tables, a family with sleepy children getting snacks, 2 uniformed Border Patrol agents grabbing dinner. Nothing appears out of the ordinary, yet Carmen can't shake the feeling of being watched. As she pays for her food, the cashier, a woman in her 60s with a nameplate reading Dolores, studies her face. "You look familiar, honey. You come through here regular?" "Couple times a month," Carmen confirms, keeping her tone casual. "Thought so. There was a fellow in earlier asking about a lady trucker in a blue Kenworth. Described you pretty good. Said he had some papers to deliver to you." Carmen's internal alarms activate immediately. What did this man look like? Latino gentleman. Real polite. Nice clothes, expensive watch. Said he was with some shipping company. Didn't leave a name. How long ago? Maybe an hour. Said he'd check back later. Carmen nods, keeping her expression neutral despite the surge of concern. "Thanks for letting me know. I'm not expecting any papers, though." "Figured as much," Dolores says with a knowing look. "Been working this stop 30 years. You learn to spot trouble. Be careful out there, honey." Back in her truck, Carmen locks the doors and starts the engine without turning on the headlights. Instead of pulling out the main exit, she takes a secondary service road behind the truck stop, emerging onto the highway from an unexpected direction. As she accelerates to highway speed, she activates her lights and scans her mirrors intensively. Nothing follows from the truck stop, but her instincts remain on high alert. Los Halcones wouldn't typically operate this boldly on the US side of the border, but Vega struck her as a man willing to push boundaries. The anonymous tip to Border Patrol had already demonstrated his reach. Carmen retrieves her satellite phone and dials Javier's number. "Carmen," he answers immediately. "You make it through the crossing okay." Eventually, had a 2-hour secondary inspection, courtesy of an anonymous tip about cocaine in my truck. Expected as much. That's why I called a contact at CBP after leaving you. Figured Vega would try something like that. Apparently, it's not his only play. Carmen explains about the man asking questions at the truck stop. "Could be nothing, but Los Halcones don't give up easily." Javier finishes her thought. "Where are you now?" "About 40 minutes from Tucson, on Interstate 19. "You've got a secure delivery location?" "Hospital receiving dock. Gated security. Guards, cameras." "Good. Go straight there, no stops. I've got a team in Tucson on an unrelated matter. I'll have them meet you at the hospital as additional security." Carmen considers refusing the help, then reconsiders. "Appreciate it." "Where are you staying tonight?" Javier asks. "Have a regular motel near the interstate. Nothing fancy, but they have secure truck parking." "Change it. I'll text you an address for a corporate apartment we maintain in Tucson. It's in a building with controlled access." "You think that's necessary?" Javier's voice turns grim. "Carmen, you humiliated Vega in front of his men. In his world, that demands a response. It might not come tonight or tomorrow, but it will come. Until we know his play, better to be cautious." After ending the call, Carmen focuses on reaching Tucson safely. The city's lights soon glow on the horizon, a constellation of civilization emerging from the desert darkness. University Hospital occupies several blocks on the city's east side, its emergency department's illuminated red sign visible from several miles away. As Carmen navigates toward the delivery entrance, she spots 3 black SUVs parked strategically around the hospital's perimeter. Not Los Halcones vehicles. These bear the subtle professional appearance of sombra security. One flashes its lights briefly as she passes, confirming their identity. The hospital's receiving dock is well organized and efficiently staffed, despite the late hour. Carmen backs her truck into the designated bay with practiced precision, then produces her documentation for the receiving manager. "You're the delay from Nogales," he says, checking her paperwork. "We were getting worried. This equipment's needed for procedures tomorrow morning." "Border crossing took longer than expected," Carmen explains simply. "Well, you made it. Let's get this unloaded." As hospital staff transfer the medical equipment containers from her truck to their inventory system, Carmen notices 2 sombra operatives maintaining a discreet watch from across the parking area. Their presence offers reassurance without drawing. Attention, professionals doing what they do best. With the delivery complete and paperwork signed, Carmen returns to her truck. Her phone buzzes with a text from Javier containing an address and entry code for the apartment. She programs it into her GPS, then pulls away from the hospital, noting with appreciation how one of the sombra vehicles falls into position 2 cars behind her. 15 minutes later, she arrives at a modern mid-rise building in a commercial district near the university. The underground parking garage requires a key card for entry, which Carmen finds waiting for her in an envelope at the security desk. The guard checks her ID before providing additional access information. "Mr. Soto, called ahead," he explains. "You'll be in Unit 512. Elevator requires the key card after hours." The apartment is spartanly furnished, but clean and secure. Clearly a corporate housing unit rather than someone's home. Large windows offer a view of the Tucson skyline, and the kitchen contains basic provisions. Carmen's phone buzzes again. With a text from Javier, "Security team will maintain perimeter watch overnight. Get some rest." For the first time since the confrontation with Los Halcones, Carmen allows herself to fully process the day's events. The attempted extortion, the tire sabotage, the standoff, Javier's timely intervention, the border complications, all unfolding in less than 12 hours. More concerning is the apparent continuation of Vega's vendetta on the US side of the border. She checks the apartment's door and window locks, then takes a quick shower. After changing into fresh clothes from her overnight bag, she calls Miguel. "Mom, where are you?" He answers immediately. "I've been waiting at your motel." Carmen winces, having forgotten in the chaos to update her son. "Change of plans, honey. I had to take a different accommodation tonight. Work situation. Everything okay?" Miguel's voice carries the perceptiveness of a child raised by a single parent, attuned to the subtlest shifts in tone. "Just tired? Long day at the border? Tell you what, I'll pick you up for breakfast tomorrow before school. That diner you like on Broadway." "Promise? You're not just gonna hit the road early?" "Promise. I've got 2 days before my next haul. Plenty of time for your science project and college talk." After ending the call, Carmen performs a final security check of the apartment, then stretches out on the bed, too wired to sleep despite her exhaustion. 24 hours ago, she was preparing for a routine border crossing. Now she's involved in what appears to be an escalating confrontation with one of the region's most dangerous criminal organizations. Her thoughts turned to Javier and Sombra Security. Their intervention had been timely and professional, but it had also elevated the situation from a personal confrontation to something that might be perceived as a territorial challenge. Javier's resources and connections offered protection, but they also complicated the dynamics. Carmen's satellite phone rings, interrupting her thoughts. The screen shows an unknown number. Vasquez, she answers cautiously. Ms. Vasquez, this is Manuel Ortiz. The truck driver from the rest area speaks in a hushed, urgent tone. We met. Earlier today? I thought you should know. Los Halcones came through the rest area about 2 hours after you left. They were asking questions, showing your picture, not friendly questions. Carmen sits up, immediately alert. How did they know to talk to you? Must have spotted us from the road when you stopped. They're watching all the routes now. My cousin and I are laying low in Hermosillo for a few days. Thought you'd want to know they're putting effort into finding you. I appreciate the warning, Manuel. Be careful, Ms. Vasquez. Vega's not known for forgiveness. After the call ends, Carmen sends a text to Javier with this new information. His response comes quickly. We'll discuss options tomorrow. Rest now. But sleep remains elusive as Carmen weighs her situation. Her regular routes take her across the border twice monthly, a pattern now known to Los Halcones. Changing jobs isn't a viable option with Miguel's college expenses looming. Paying Vega's extortion would only mark her as an ongoing revenue source. The confrontation she'd hoped to leave behind at the border crossing seems instead to be following her, expanding, complicating her carefully structured life. As she finally drifts towards sleep, Carmen acknowledges a difficult truth. This situation won't be resolved by simply driving away. One way or another, a reckoning with Alejandro Vega and Los Halcones lies ahead. Carmen awakens before dawn, her military-ingrained habits persisting despite the unfamiliar surroundings. The digital clock on the nightstand reads 5:17 a.m. She performs a quick security check of the apartment, then brews coffee in the small kitchen while reviewing her schedule. Breakfast with Miguel at 7 a.m., then a day of unexpected free time. Before her next assignment, through the window, she spots a somber security vehicle still maintaining position in the parking area. Javier's thoroughness would be comforting under different circumstances, but now it reinforces the reality of her situation. No longer just a trucker with a schedule, but someone under protection from cartel retaliation. Her satellite phone rings at 5:45 a.m. Javier, characteristically early. Morning, she answers. Your people have been out there all night. Rotating shifts, Javier confirms. Any disturbances? Quiet night. But Manuel Ortiz called, the trucker from the rest stop. Said Los Halcones were asking questions about me. Showing my photo. Expected. Vega's pride is wounded. Javier pauses. We need to talk about your next steps, Carmen. I've been making some calls. Los Halcones have more reach than we initially thought. They've established connections with distribution networks in Phoenix, Tucson, and El Paso. Your regular border crossings put you directly in their sphere of influence. Carmen absorbs this unwelcome information. I can't just abandon my roots, Javier. This job pays Miguel's college tuition. Not suggesting you quit, but we need a strategy beyond hoping Vega loses interest. He won't. What are you proposing? Meet me for lunch at the Continental Hotel downtown, 1 p.m. I've invited someone you should talk to. U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. Agent Sarah Winters. Carmen's grip on her coffee mug tightens. DEA. Javier, I'm not looking to get involved in some federal operation. You're already involved, Carmen. The question is whether you face this alone or with resources behind you. Just hear what Agent Winters has to say. No commitments yet. After ending the call, Carmen texts Miguel confirming their breakfast plans, then showers and changes into fresh clothes. Before leaving, she receives another text from Javier. Team, will maintain discreet surveillance until we meet. Standard protocol. The morning light reveals Tucson stirring to life. Traffic building on major arteries, university students already hurrying to early classes, medical workers changing shifts at nearby hospitals. Carmen takes a circuitous route to Miguel's apartment, watching for any signs of surveillance beyond Javier's team. Her son waits outside his building, backpack slung over one shoulder, looking simultaneously like the child she raised and the adult he's becoming. At 17, Miguel has Carmen's determined eyes and analytical mind, but his easygoing nature comes from his father. Already accepted to engineering programs at 3 universities, his future stretches bright before him. A future Carmen is determined to secure, regardless of the complications now threatening her own. Mom, he hugs her as she parks. Thought you might not make it after yesterday's delay. Promised, didn't I? Carmen keeps her tone light. How's the science project? Coming! During breakfast at Broadway Diner, Miguel enthusiastically explains his engineering design, a water filtration system using locally available materials, intended for rural communities without reliable infrastructure. His passion reminds Carmen powerfully of his father, Raul, who had approached his own engineering work with the same blend of technical precision and humanitarian purpose. Professor Alvarez thinks it could qualify for the national competition, Miguel concludes, which would look great on my final university applications. It's impressive work, Carmen says, genuinely proud. Your father would have loved seeing this. Miguel's expression softens at the mention of Raul. Though his parents had divorced when he was 7, his father had remained a loving, if sometimes distant, presence until his death. Actually, Miguel says, I've been meaning to tell you. I found some of Dad's old engineering journals when I was researching filtration systems. There was a letter inside addressed to you. Carmen's surprise must show on her face. It's from years ago, Miguel clarifies. Probably from when you were still married. I didn't read it, but I brought it. He retrieves an envelope from his backpack. Thought you might want it. The envelope is yellowed with age, Carmen's name written in Raul's distinctive handwriting. She tucks it into her jacket pocket, emotions complicated. Thank you. I'll read it later. After breakfast, Carmen drives Miguel to school, maintaining the routine that grounds their relationship despite her irregular work schedule. As they pull up to the high school entrance, he hesitates before getting out. Mom, is everything okay? You seem distracted. Carmen considers deflecting, then reconsiders. Miguel has always been perceptive, and treating him like a child would only create distance. Just some complications with work, nothing serious. His expression says he's not entirely convinced. The nothing serious that made you change hotels last night. Occupational hazard, she says with a smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. Sometimes shipping routes get complicated. I'm handling it. Miguel studies her face a moment longer. You'd tell me if something was really wrong, right? Of course, Carmen assures him, hoping the half-truth isn't visible in her expression. Now go blow away Professor Alvarez with that brilliant design. After dropping Miguel off, Carmen drives to a small park near the university where she can gather her thoughts. Finding a bench with good visibility of the surrounding area, she finally opens Raul's letter, The paper inside is filled with his familiar handwriting, dated 15 years earlier, shortly before their separation. Carmen, I'm writing this after our argument about your decision to return to cross-border routes. I said things in anger that I regret, about you choosing danger over our family. That wasn't fair. What I couldn't express then is my admiration for your courage, mixed with my fear of losing you. The strength that drew me to you, your refusal to be limited by others' expectations, is the same quality that sometimes makes loving you so challenging. Whatever happens between us, I want you to know I respect your choices, even when I don't understand them. You've never run from difficult situations. It's not in your nature. With love and respect, Raul. Carmen stares at the letter, its timing uncanny given her current circumstances. 15 years after writing these words, Raul still understood her better than she sometimes understood herself. Running from difficult situations had never been her nature, not in Afghanistan, not in her marriage, not in her career, and not now with Los Halcones. She carefully refolds the letter and returns it to her pocket, her resolve strengthening. The meeting with Javier and the DEA agent takes on new significance. Not just a discussion of options, but a strategic planning session for confronting the threat directly. At 12:45 p.m., Carmen arrives at the Continental Hotel, a restored historic property in downtown Tucson that caters to business travelers and visiting university dignitaries. The lobby's southwestern elegance provides neutral territory, public enough for safety, upscale enough for privacy. Javier waits in a corner seating area, his casual business attire blending perfectly with the hotel's clientele. Beside him sits a woman in her late 30s with short blonde hair and the alert posture of someone who assesses exits and threats as habitually as breathing. Though wearing civilian clothes, tailored slacks and a blazer, Agent Winters has the unmistakable bearing of federal law enforcement. Introductions are brief and direct. Winters gets immediately to the point. Mr. Soto has briefed me on your encounter with Alejandro Vega and Los Halcones. She begins after they're seated in a private dining room off the main restaurant. Your situation presents both a problem and an opportunity. I'm not interested in becoming an informant, Carmen says flatly. Winter's expression remains neutral. Not asking you to, but the reality is, Los Halcones has already identified you as an adversary. That won't change whether you cooperate with us or not. Sarah's right, Javier adds. Vega's already made attempts to compromise you. The border crossing setup, men looking for you at truck stops. This escalates from here. The server interrupts with water and menus. After he departs, Winters continues in a lower voice. Los Halcones has evolved beyond traditional cartel operations. They're establishing legitimate business fronts, corrupting officials on both sides of the border, diversifying into transportation control and human trafficking. Vega's particularly focused on controlling key transportation corridors, which makes you, as an independent operator who stood up to them, a symbolic problem, Javier adds. Carmen processes this information. So, what exactly are you proposing? DEA and Homeland Security have a joint task force targeting Los Halcones, Winters explains. We've been building a case against their U.S. operations for 8 months. What we lack is concrete evidence connecting Vega directly to criminal activity on the U.S. side. He's careful, uses intermediaries, maintains plausible deniability. And I fit into this how? Vega's fixation on you creates a potential vulnerability, Winters says. From what Mr. Soto described, he was personally present during an attempted extortion on Mexican soil, then orchestrated harassment continuing onto U.S. territory. That pattern could help establish the border-crossing nature of his enterprise. Essential for federal prosecution. You want to use me as bait, Carmen concludes. I'd frame it differently, Winters counters. We're offering protection and resources while you continue your legitimate business. If Vega pursues his vendetta, we'll be positioned to document it and build our case. If he doesn't, you benefit from our protection anyway. The server returns for their orders. The interruption gives Carmen time to consider the layers of this proposal. When they're alone again, she asks the question foremost in her mind. What about my son? Miguel can't become collateral damage in your operation. Completely understand, Winters says. We can provide security for him as well, discreetly. High school senior, correct? Applying to engineering programs? Carmen nods, unsurprised that the agent has done her homework. The task force has resources to ensure his safety. We can also expedite your fast program renewals and border crossing clearances, reducing delays. My concern, Javier interjects, is that Carmen needs immediate protection, while your case building might take months. Los Halcones won't wait. That's where Sombra comes in, Winters acknowledges. Your security teams provide the immediate response capability, while our task force handles the longer-term legal framework. We've vetted your organization, Mr. Soto. Your military background and legitimate business operations make you an acceptable partner. Carmen studies both of them, understanding the unspoken dynamic. The DEA needs her situation to advance their case against Los Halcones. Javier feels responsible for her safety given their shared military past. Both have resources she lacks as an individual facing a cartel's vengeance. I need to think about this, she finally says, and discuss certain aspects with Miguel. He's old enough to understand there are risks in my work, but this takes things to another level. Of course. Winters agrees, but I should mention we have intelligence suggesting Los Halcones is expanding operations significantly this month. Multiple new shipment routes, personnel movements, unusual financial transactions. Whatever Vega's planning, it's happening soon. Our window for getting ahead of this is closing. Their lunch continues with discussion of operational details, communication protocols, emergency responses, intelligence sharing. Throughout, Carmen evaluates not just the proposal, but the people making it. Winters impresses her as competent and straightforward, though clearly focused on the broader case beyond Carmen's individual situation. Javier remains the known quantity, trustworthy based on shared history, but also bringing complex motivations as the head of a security company, with its own objectives in the region. As the meeting concludes, Winters provides a secure phone. My direct line is programmed in. Consider everything we've discussed, but don't wait too long. Vega strikes me as a man who plans methodically, then acts decisively. After Winters departs, Carmen and Javier remain at the table, coffee cups cooling. Between them, you're not telling me everything, Carmen observes. There's more to your involvement than just helping an old army colleague. Javier's expression acknowledges the accuracy of her assessment. Sombra has been tracking Los Halcones independently for nearly a year. They murdered one of our team members, Marco Delgado. He was investigating their human trafficking operations near Ciudad Juarez. Made it look like a random carjacking, but we found evidence linking it to Vega directly. So this is personal for you too. Justice, not revenge, Javier clarifies. But yes, I have additional motivation beyond our friendship. Los Halcones represents a cancer in the border regions where we operate, corrupting officials, terrorizing communities, undermining legitimate business. Your situation creates an opportunity to address a larger problem. Carmen considers his honesty refreshing, if complicated. I need to pick up Miguel from school, then I'll make my decision. One more thing, Javier says as they stand to leave. Whether you work with the DEA or not, Sombra will continue protecting you and Miguel. Consider it repayment of an old debt. Careful, Javier, Carmen warns with a hint of her old humor. Debts like that can get expensive. His answering smile carries genuine warmth. Some things outweigh the balance sheet. We took an oath once to defend against all enemies. That didn't expire with our discharge papers. As Carmen walks through the hotel lobby, she notices a man seated in the bar area, briefly turning away as she passes. Something about his movement triggers her situational awareness, too deliberate, too calculated. She doesn't break stride, but adjusts her path to catch his reflection in a decorative mirror. Hispanic male, early 30s, business casual attire, apparently studying something on his phone. Nothing overtly suspicious, yet her instincts, honed through military service and years navigating dangerous routes, signal caution. Outside, the Arizona sun bathes the street in harsh light. Carmen walks to her personal vehicle, a modest sedan rather than her truck, parked in the hotel's garage. As she drives out, she implements evasive techniques taught during her military. Training, varied routes, unpredictable turns, sudden lane changes, while watching for vehicles maintaining pace. Nothing concrete emerges, yet the sensation of being observed persists. Whether Los Halcones has already extended surveillance to Tucson or her heightened awareness is creating false positives, the effect is the same. A shrinking perimeter of safety around her normal life. As she navigates toward Miguel's school, Carmen makes her decision. The luxury of avoiding entanglement with federal agencies and security contractors has evaporated. Vega's pursuit has already altered her reality. The question now isn't whether to engage with Winter's proposal, but how to do so while maintaining maximum protection for Miguel and herself. At a red light, Carmen retrieves Raúl's letter from her pocket, reading again his assessment of her character. You've never run from difficult situations. It's not in your nature. Still know me too well, even after all these years, she murmurs, tucking the letter away as the light changes. The afternoon sun casts her shadow ahead on the pavement. Elongated, solitary, resolute. Carmen Vasquez drives forward, already formulating the careful explanations she'll offer her son and the strategic boundaries she'll establish with Winters and Javier. The confrontation with Los Halcones has evolved beyond a roadside incident into something far more complex, but she'll navigate this terrain as she has all others, with courage, intelligence, and unwavering determination to protect what matters most. The high school parking lot bustles with activity as Carmen arrives for pickup. Students stream toward waiting cars, yellow buses line the curb, and teachers supervise the organized chaos with practiced efficiency. She spots Miguel by the science building, deep in conversation with a gray-haired man she recognizes as Professor Alvarez, his mentor for the engineering project. As she waits, Carmen's phone buzzes with a text from an unknown number. Decision. Time approaching. SW Agent Winters, characteristically direct. Carmen doesn't respond, instead watching Miguel as he enthusiastically gestures while explaining something to his teacher. His future stretches bright before him: university, career, possibilities unencumbered by border conflicts and cartel vendettas. Her decision must protect that future, whatever else it entails. Miguel notices her car and waves goodbye to his professor, jogging over with the boundless energy of youth. "Mom! Professor Alvarez thinks my filtration design could qualify for a patent application. He's connecting me with the university's intellectual property office." "That's fantastic," Carmen says as he slides into the passenger seat. "Your father would be incredibly proud." Miguel's expression brightens further at the mention of Raul. "I was thinking the same thing. This is exactly the kind of practical engineering he always talked about." As they pull away from the school, Carmen makes a decision. Change of plans for tonight. Let's grab dinner somewhere special. "What's the occasion?" Miguel asks, immediately perceptive. "Does celebrating my brilliant son's potential patent count?" He studies her face, not entirely convinced, but willing to accept the explanation for now. "Can we try that new place near the university? The Sonoran grill everyone's talking about." Perfect. The restaurant proves an excellent choice. Busy, enough to provide ambient privacy for conversation, but with well-spaced tables allowing them to speak without being overheard. After they order, Carmen steers the conversation toward Miguel's immediate plans: university applications and scholarship opportunities, momentarily setting aside the more difficult discussion ahead. Their meals arrive. Traditional Sonoran cuisine, elevated with contemporary techniques. As they eat, Carmen observes a black SUV parking across the street. Two men remaining inside with a clear view of the restaurant entrance. Not obvious enough to alarm casual observers, but positioned for surveillance. Sombra operatives, she assumes, part of Javier's promised protection detail. "So," Miguel says after finishing his main course, "are you going to tell me what's really going on?" The hotel change, the distracted looks, and now a surprise celebration dinner. Carmen considers deflecting again, then abandons the impulse. Treating him like a child would only create distance between them at a time when honesty matters most. "You're right," she acknowledges. "Something happened on my last run that's complicated my work situation." Miguel sets down his fork, giving her his full attention. "What kind of something?" "I had an encounter with a cartel organization called Los Halcones near Santa Elena. They tried to extort protection money from me for using their transportation corridors. I refused." Miguel's expression shifts from curiosity to concern. "Mum, those cartels don't just let things go when people refuse them." "No, they don't," Carmen confirms, "which is why I need to make some temporary changes to our routines." She outlines the situation in measured terms: the confrontation, Javier's intervention, the border crossing complications, and the subsequent surveillance. She doesn't mention the DEA's interest or Winter's proposal yet, focusing instead on the security precautions already implemented. Miguel listens without interrupting, his expression cycling through concern, fear, and finally a determined calm that reminds Carmen powerfully of herself. "What does all this mean for us practically?" he asks when she finishes. "For the immediate future, we need to be more security conscious. Different routes to school, varied routines, awareness of surroundings. Javier has arranged protection, discreet but effective. This SUV across the street, Miguel asks, surprising her with his observational skills. Carmen nods. You noticed. Mom, I grew up with a military intelligence officer for a mother. You taught me situational awareness before I could ride a bike. This draws a genuine smile. From Carmen. True, there's also a possibility I might need to coordinate with federal agencies regarding the cartel's cross-border activities. Miguel processes this new information because they tried to set you up at the border. That, and because Los Halcones is expanding operations in ways that concern both Mexican and U.S. authorities. Are we in actual danger? The direct question hangs between them. Precautions are warranted, Carmen answers carefully. But I wouldn't be discussing this in a public restaurant if I believed we faced immediate threat. Javier's team is highly capable, and I still have contacts from my military days who can provide additional support. Miguel nods slowly, digesting. Everything. What about your regular routes? Will you keep crossing at Nogales? That's part of what I need to decide. There are legitimate security concerns, but also practical realities. My cross-border contracts pay significantly better than domestic routes, with university expenses coming up. Don't make decisions based on my tuition, Miguel interrupts. Firmly, I can get student loans, apply for more scholarships. It's not worth risking your safety. Carmen reaches across the table, squeezing his hand. This situation will resolve, one way or another. The question is how to navigate it intelligently in the meantime. As they finish dinner, Carmen notices Miguel scanning the restaurant periodically, his new awareness already manifesting in behavioral changes. Part of her regrets introducing this element of caution into his world. Yet she knows concealing the truth would be both impractical and potentially dangerous. Outside, the evening has cooled considerably, stars emerging in the desert sky. The Sombra SUV remains in position, its occupants maintaining their professional distance. Carmen opens her car door, then pauses, noticing a small object tucked under the windshield wiper. A playing card, with practiced casualness that masks. Her sudden tension, she retrieves it, the King of Spades, with a hawk drawn in black marker across the face. What's that? Miguel asks, noticing her expression change. Carmen maintains her composure, tucking the card into her pocket. Just an advertisement. Let's head home. As she starts the engine, her decision crystallizes. The playing card. Los Halcones is calling. Card, their name literally meaning the Hawks, confirms what she already suspected. Vega's reach extends to Tucson, and his message is clear. Distance provides no safety. The time for deliberation has ended. Now comes action, strategy, and the careful deployment of all resources at her disposal. Carmen pulls away from the restaurant, mind already mapping contingencies and countermeasures. The protection of her son and preservation of her livelihood will require a delicate balance of federal resources, Sombra's capabilities, and her own considerable skills. The game has changed, but Carmen Vasquez has never backed down from a challenge, especially not when everything she values hangs in the balance. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Carmen drives with heightened awareness, taking an indirect route back to the apartment building while watching for potential surveillance. The playing card rests in her pocket like a physical manifestation of the threat now shadowing them. Miguel remains silent beside her, his earlier confidence tempered by the discovery of the card. He doesn't ask questions, understanding instinctively that this moment requires focus rather than conversation. At the apartment building, Carmen parks in the underground garage rather than the street-level visitors area, positioning her vehicle near a concrete support column that provides partial cover. As they walk toward the elevator, the Sombra operative, who's been following them, pulls into a space near the exit ramp, establishing a security perimeter without drawing attention. The building has controlled access, Carmen explains as they ride up to the 5th floor. Key card entry, security desk, surveillance cameras, one of Javier's corporate apartments. Miguel nods, visually mapping the hallway as they exit the elevator, noting stairwell locations, camera positions, potential choke points. His instinctive security assessment sends a pang through Carmen's heart. No 17-year-old should need these skills, yet she's grateful for his adaptability. Inside the apartment, Carmen performs a thorough security check before fully settling in. She retrieves the playing card from her pocket, placing it on the kitchen counter where the overhead light illuminates the crude hawk drawing. Los Halcones, Miguel says, studying the card. Their symbol, a calling card, Carmen confirms, meant to communicate that they know where I am. How did they find us so quickly? Multiple possibilities. They could have followed me from the border crossing yesterday, identified my personal vehicle, or have associates with access to commercial driver records. The cartel has resources. Miguel's expression remains remarkably composed given the circumstances. What happens now? Carmen retrieves the secure phone Agent Winters provided, making her decision. Now I make a call. Winters answers immediately. Have you decided? Yes, Carmen says without preamble. I found their calling card on my windshield tonight. A king of spades with a hawk drawn on it. They've located me in Tucson, which means they've likely identified Miguel as well. A moment of silence as Winters processes this escalation. Where are you now? Secure location, one of Sombra's properties. Stay there. I'll have a team at your location in 20 minutes to document the card and establish additional security. We should also implement protective measures for your son immediately. Agreed, Carmen says, meeting Miguel's eyes as he listens to her side of the conversation. But I have conditions for my cooperation. I'm listening. First, Miguel's safety is the absolute priority. I want him moved to a secure location with protection until this situation resolves. Miguel starts to protest, but Carmen raises a hand, asking for his patience. Second, I want complete transparency about any operations involving me. No information compartmentalization or need-to-know barriers. If I'm putting myself at risk, I need to understand exactly how and why. That's unusual. For federal operations, Winters notes, but given the circumstances, acceptable. Anything else? Yes. I continue my legitimate work as much as possible. My livelihood can't be sacrificed for your investigation. We can work within those parameters, Winters agrees. My team will be there soon. In the meantime, document everything. About where you found the card, potential witnesses, security cameras in the area that might have captured the placement. After ending the call, Carmen turns to Miguel, anticipating his objections. Before you argue, I'm not leaving you, he interrupts firmly. Whatever secure location they're suggesting, we both go or neither of us goes. Miguel, Mom, I'm not negotiable on this. Dad always said your stubbornness was genetic. Looks like he was right. Despite the tension of the moment, Carmen feels a flicker of pride at her son's resolve. The safest approach is to separate us. Makes it harder for them to target both simultaneously. Maybe for normal people, Miguel counters. But we're not exactly normal, are we? You trained with military intelligence. I've grown up learning operational security as casually as other kids learn sports. We're stronger together. Carmen studies. Her son's face, the determination in his eyes so similar to her own, the analytical mind working through scenarios just as she'd taught him. You understand, this isn't a game or an adventure. Real danger, real consequences. All the more reason we stick together, Miguel insists. Two sets of eyes, two minds working the problem. Isn't that what you always taught me about survival situations? Before Carmen can respond, her phone buzzes with a text from the Sombra, operative monitoring the building. DEA agents arrived, confirmed credentials, escorting up now. Minutes later, a precise knock signals the agent's arrival. Carmen verifies their identities through the peephole before admitting Winters and two colleagues. The senior agent's expression is professionally neutral as she examines the playing card, now carefully preserved in a plastic sleeve that Miguel found in his backpack. Classic intimidation technique, Winters observes. Letting you know they've bound you without immediate violence, psychological warfare. Effective, Carmen acknowledges, especially with my son involved. Winters glances at Miguel, assessing. We have a safe house prepared in Phoenix. Restricted access, round-the-clock security. We can move him tonight. I'm staying with my mother, Miguel states before Carmen can respond. Non-negotiable. Winters raises an eyebrow, looking to Carmen for confirmation. He makes a compelling case for remaining together, Carmen explains. And there are practical advantages to a unified security approach rather than dividing resources to protect two separate locations. The agent considers this, then nods reluctantly. It's irregular, but we can adapt the security plan. The safe house is large enough for both of you. We'll need to move quickly, though. The card suggests they're establishing surveillance patterns which typically precedes direct action. While Winters coordinates with her team, Carmen and Miguel gather essential belongings. Carmen notices her son packing his engineering project materials alongside clothes and personal items. The filtration system design, Miguel nods, securing his laptop and notebooks in his backpack. Not leaving it behind. This could be my university admission ticket. His priorities, education and future planning, even amid security threats, remind Carmen sharply of herself at a similar age. In Afghanistan, she'd studied language texts between reconnaissance missions, planning for civilian career options even while bullets flew overhead. The parallel both warms and concerns her. 40 minutes. Later, they're escorted to an unmarked SUV with tinted windows. The Sombra operative, who's been monitoring the building, coordinates with Winters' team, establishing a convoy formation. DEA vehicle in front, Sombra following, with a second DEA SUV bringing up the rear. As they pull away from the apartment building, Carmen spots a sedan parked across the street, its driver too carefully casual, too deliberately uninterested in their departure. She makes brief eye contact through the tinted window. Hispanic male, early 30s, the same build as the man she'd noticed at the Continental Hotel. We have a tail, she informs Winters, who sits opposite them in the vehicle's rear compartment. Dark blue sedan, Arizona plates. Winters doesn't turn to look, instead activating her communications device. Possible surveillance vehicle identified. Dark blue sedan, westbound on R6. Team 2, verify and monitor. The agent's response validates Carmen's assessment without questioning her observation. A professional courtesy that earns Winters a measure of trust. The convoy continues through Tucson's evening traffic, executing a series of counter-surveillance maneuvers designed to identify and potentially shake pursuers. Miguel watches the choreographed driving tactics with analytical interest. Bastions spiral, he notes as their vehicle executes a particular pattern of turns. You taught me that one from your training manual. Carmen smiles despite the circumstances. Top of your class if military intelligence ever recruits you. I think I'll stick with engineering, Miguel replies. Less dramatic. The exchange draws a hint of a smile from Winters, humanizing the federal agent briefly. Smart choice. Better retirement benefits too. The radio crackles with an update from the trailing vehicle. Sedan dropped back after we initiated pattern. Alpha, currently holding position at Broadway and Campbell, appears to be surveillance only, no aggressive posture. They're documenting our departure, not attempting interception, Carmen concludes. Gathering intelligence rather than taking immediate action, Winters nods agreement. Consistent with Cartel methodology, they'll analyze the security response, identify potential vulnerabilities, then develop a targeted approach, which tells us we have some time, Carmen observes. Days probably rather than hours. Assuming standard operational patterns, Winters cautions. Vega might accelerate timelines given his personal involvement. The convoy exits Tucson, heading northwest toward Phoenix on Interstate 10. Desert darkness envelops them, the highway, stretching like a black ribbon through the arid landscape. Carmen gazes out at the silhouettes of saguaro cacti against the starlit sky, contemplating the rapid evolution of her situation. From independent trucker to federal asset in less than 48 hours. Miguel eventually dozes beside her, the emotional and physical toll of the day catching up with him. Carmen watches him sleep, his features relaxed in unconsciousness. Looking younger than his 17 years, her resolve solidifies further. Whatever comes next, whatever risks she must take, whatever confrontation awaits with Vega and Los Halcones, will be undertaken with absolute focus on the endgame, returning Miguel to the normal life he deserves, where engineering projects and university applications represent his greatest challenges. As the lights of Phoenix appear on the horizon, Carmen's satellite phone vibrates with a message from Javier. Team confirms Los Halcones surveillance units at apartment and restaurant. Professional operation, cartel trained. This is more than a vendetta. It's a strategic focus. Be extremely cautious. The warning reinforces Carmen's growing suspicion. Vega's pursuit extends beyond wounded pride or territorial enforcement. Something about her specific situation, her roots, her background, or perhaps her connection to Sombra, has triggered a targeted response far beyond typical cartel intimidation tactics. Understanding why might prove as important as countering the immediate threat. As they approach the Phoenix city limits, Carmen begins mentally mapping potential motivations and connections, preparing for the strategic thinking that has kept her alive through combat zones and cartel territories alike. The game has evolved, the stakes raised, but Carmen Vasquez has never backed down from a challenge, especially not when her son's future hangs in the balance. The DEA safe house sits on the outskirts of Phoenix, a sprawling ranch-style property surrounded by desert landscape. its perimeter secured by an unobtrusive but effective combination of physical barriers and surveillance technology. As their convoy approaches through a winding access road, Carmen notes the defensive advantages of the location. Clear sight lines in all directions, minimal cover for potential hostiles, controlled entry and exit points. Inside, the house presents an incongruous normalcy, comfortable furnishings, well-stocked kitchen, even decoration touches that suggest an ordinary residence rather than a government facility. The effect is intentional, Winters explains, as she gives them a brief tour, designed to provide psychological comfort during potentially stressful protective situations. You'll have complete run of the main house, the agent clarifies. Security. Team maintains positions in the perimeter buildings and monitoring station. Privacy with protection. Carmen inspects the bedroom allocated to Miguel. Spacious, with a desk suitable for continuing his schoolwork. How long should we anticipate staying? Initial assessment suggests at least 1 week while we develop our operational approach, Winters answers. We'll coordinate with Miguel's school for remote learning arrangements. Our cover story is a family emergency requiring temporary relocation. Miguel sets his backpack on the desk, immediately unpacking his project materials. Will I be able to access university research databases? I can't fall behind on my design work. Secure internet connection is available, Winters confirms. All communications routed through encrypted channels. Just avoid revealing location details or specific circumstances in any exchanges. After Miguel settles in, Carmen joins Winters in the kitchen, where the agent has spread case files across the dining table. Satellite imagery shows Santa Elena and surrounding transportation routes, with key locations marked. The truck stop where Carmen first encountered Vega, the roadside. Ambush site, border crossing facilities. We need to understand why Los Halcones has dedicated significant resources to pursuing you specifically, Winters begins, her tone shifting to full operational mode. This level of focus suggests something beyond routine extortion or territorial enforcement. Carmen reviews the timeline of events, searching for patterns or anomalies. The initial approach at Descanso del Camionero followed standard cartel methodology, identifying independent operators, demanding protection payments, escalating when refused. The roadside confrontation likewise fits established patterns. It's the follow-up that's unusual, Winters notes. Cross-border pursuit, dedicated surveillance teams in Tucson, rapid identification of your civilian identity and personal vehicle. That represents significant resource allocation for what began as a routine shakedown. A thought surfaces in Carmen's analytical mind. What if this wasn't random? What if I was specifically targeted from the beginning? Winters looks up sharply. Meaning? Most cartel extortion operations are opportunistic. They approach whatever truckers pass through their territory. But Vega seemed to recognize me immediately, at the truck stop, before even confirming I was the driver of the Kenworth. The agent considers this new angle. You've run that route regularly for years without previous incidents. Twice monthly for 3 years, Carmen confirms. Same crossing. Points, same general schedule. If they'd been shaking down all independents, they would have approached me long before now. Winters retrieves a laptop from her briefcase, accessing secure databases. Let's examine Los Halcones' known associates and operations during the past month. Any anomalies that might connect to your transportation company or routes? As they work through intelligence reports and surveillance summaries, a clearer picture emerges. Los Halcones has recently expanded operations significantly along the Nogales corridor, establishing new relationships with local officials and businesses. Carmen's trucking company had recently secured several new medical equipment contracts for cross-border deliveries, high-value cargo with expedited processing at customs. The desert sunrise filters through the blinds of the safe house, painting golden stripes across the kitchen table where Carmen sits, reviewing operational details with Agent Winters. 3 days have passed since their arrival. Days spent in tactical planning and strategic preparation while Miguel continues his schoolwork remotely, his university project progressing despite their unusual circumstances. The surveillance team reports increased cartel activity at 3 locations along your regular route, Winters explains, indicating markers on the digital map displayed on her tablet. They've established observation points at key junctions, including 2 new checkpoints near border crossings that weren't there last week. Carmen studies the patterns, her military training automatically identifying tactical implications. They're mapping alternative crossing options, preparing for multiple scenarios. This isn't just about finding me. They're developing a comprehensive approach to controlling transportation corridors. Exactly, Winters confirms, which makes our counter-operation even more critical. If we can document their cross-border organizational structure, we can potentially dismantle their entire regional network. The plan they've developed over 72 hours of intensive work is both elegant and perilous. Carmen will resume her regular transportation route, appearing to operate normally while carrying specialized monitoring equipment concealed within her cargo. The DEA and Sombra Security will maintain surveillance coverage, documenting Los Halcones' response and gathering critical evidence of their cross-border criminal enterprise. The risk assessment still concerns me, Carmen says, tracing the route on the map with her finger. Too many variables, too many potential points of compromise. Every operation carries risk, Winters acknowledges. But we've built in multiple contingencies and extraction protocols. Javier's team provides immediate response capability, while our federal resources handle the broader surveillance net. Their discussion is interrupted by Miguel entering the kitchen, his expression troubled. Despite attempts to project calm, "Mom, can we talk for a minute alone?" Winters tactfully gathers her materials. "I need to check in with the perimeter team anyway. We'll reconvene at 1100 hours. When they're alone, Miguel sits across from Carmen, his shoulders tense with the weight of concerns beyond his years. "I overheard enough to understand what you're planning. You're going to deliberately put yourself back in their path." Carmen doesn't insult her son with denial. "It's a controlled operation with extensive security measures." "It's dangerous," Miguel counters, his voice steady despite the emotion behind his words. "I found statistics on cartel violence while researching for a school assignment. The numbers don't favor anyone who becomes a target, even with federal protection." Carmen reaches across the table, taking her son's hand. The gesture reminds her powerfully of similar moments with her own mother decades earlier, when teenage Carmen would voice concerns about her mother's military deployments. The irony isn't lost on her. "What alternatives would you suggest?" she asks genuinely, respecting his intelligence and perspective. Miguel's response comes without hesitation, clearly the product of considerable thought. "Relocate completely. I can transfer schools, You can find domestic trucking routes. We start over somewhere without cartel reach. Running would mean abandoning everything we've built, Carmen says gently. Your university prospects, my business, reputation, our home. And there's no guarantee Los Halcones wouldn't simply track us to a new location. Their network extends throughout the Southwest. But at least we'd be together, Miguel argues. This operation splits us apart right when the danger is highest. The core of his fear reveals itself. Not just concern for her safety, but the prospect of separation. Carmen understands completely. After his father's death, they've been each other's only constant. A two-person family united against life's challenges. I've accounted for that in the operational planning, Carmen explains. You'll remain here under protective custody, with constant updates on my status and location. If extraction becomes necessary, our reunion point is predetermined and secured. Miguel's expression remains skeptical. You can't predict every variable. Dad used to say even the most perfect engineering plan fails when it meets real-world conditions. Your father was right, Carmen acknowledges. But he also taught you about calculated risks and necessary actions, didn't he? This situation won't resolve itself. Los Halcones will continue pursuing us until either they succeed in compromising my transportation routes or they're convinced the effort exceeds the potential gain. Their conversation continues through breakfast, Carmen patiently addressing Miguel's concerns while validating his fears. By the time Winters returns, mother and son have reached an uneasy compromise. Miguel accepts the necessity of the operation, but insists on more robust communication protocols than initially planned, including an hourly check-in system when Carmen is on the road. We can accommodate that, Winters agrees, recognizing the importance of maintaining family trust within the operational framework. Actually, it adds a security layer. Any missed check-in automatically triggers response protocols. The remainder of the day unfolds with increased activity as final preparations take shape. Javier arrives mid-afternoon, bringing specialized communications equipment and additional intelligence gathered by Sombra operatives in the field. Los Halcones has significantly increased personnel movements along your regular route, he reports, during the strategy session in the Safe House's secure conference room. But there's something else we've noticed. They're conducting parallel surveillance on 3 other independent truckers who regularly cross at Nogales. This new information shifts their understanding of the situation. They're hedging their bets, Carmen concludes. If they can't compromise my routes, they'll target other transporters with similar credentials. Makes sense tactically, Winters agrees, but it also suggests they're operating under time constraints. This level of simultaneous resource deployment isn't sustainable without a significant payoff. Javier nods grimly. Our sources indicate a major shipment is being planned, something valuable enough to warrant extraordinary security measures. That's likely why they're so focused on establishing controlled transportation channels right now. The stakes of their counter-operation suddenly elevate. Not just Carmen's personal safety or evidence collection, but potentially interdicting a major cartel shipment that could fund criminal operations throughout the region for months or years. As evening approaches, final briefings begin with both DEA and Sombra tactical teams. Carmen will depart the following morning, resuming her regular schedule as if returning from routine time off. Her truck, retrieved from secure storage, and thoroughly examined for tampering, awaits at a transportation facility near Phoenix, prepped for the operation with concealed monitoring equipment and emergency response systems. During a brief break in the preparations, Carmen finds Miguel in his room, focused intently on his laptop screen, where complex filtration system diagrams display his continued work despite their circumstances. "Your determination reminds me of your father," she says from the doorway. "He could focus on engineering problems through any distraction." Miguel looks up, a small smile breaking through his worry. He used to say the best way to handle stress was to solve a different problem entirely. The filtration system is actually coming together better here than it was at home. Maybe pressure improves my design process. Carmen enters, sitting on the edge of his bed. "I'm leaving early tomorrow, before dawn." "I know," Miguel says simply. "Agent Winters already briefed me on the schedule and communications protocol. Hourly check-ins, coded verification phrases, emergency contingencies. Very thorough." "I need you to promise me something," Carmen says, her tone shifting to match the gravity of her request. "If anything happens, if there's any indication the operation has been compromised, you follow the emergency protocols exactly. No heroics, no deviations. Only if you make the same promise," Miguel counters. "Follow the extraction plan if things go wrong. Don't try to handle Los Halcones on your own." The parallel nature of their concerns, each more worried for the other than themselves, brings a moment of connection despite the tension surrounding them. Carmen pulls her son into an embrace, feeling simultaneously the child he was and the man he's becoming. "Deal," she says softly. "Operational discipline on both sides." Later that night, after final preparations are complete and the safe house settles into watchful quiet, Carmen stands at the kitchen window, gazing out at the desert landscape, illuminated by moonlight. The terrain reminds her powerfully of Afghanistan. Stark. Beauty concealing potential danger, appearances masking complex realities. Winters joins her, coffee mug in hand, despite the late hour. "Can't sleep?" "Pre-mission routine," Carmen explains. "Used to do the same before reconnaissance operations, mental preparation." The agent nods understanding. "Military habits stick with you." "They kept me alive," Carmen observes, still scanning. The moonlit perimeter, where security personnel maintain their vigilant watch. "In Afghanistan and afterward. Your background is what makes this operation viable," Winters says. "Most civilians couldn't handle this level of pressure or tactical complexity." Carmen turns from the window, studying the federal agent. Over the past days, she's come to respect Winters' professionalism and straightforward approach. What happens after? Assuming the operation succeeds and you gather the evidence needed against Los Halcones. Ideally, federal indictments against Vega and his lieutenants, dismantling their cross-border network. Realistically, they'll adapt, reorganize, perhaps with new leadership. Cartels are resilient, but setting them back even 6 months creates space for legitimate businesses and communities to strengthen. And for Miguel and me, Winters doesn't sugarcoat the reality. Witness protection would be standard protocol. New identities, relocation, severing connections to your current lives. The prospect lands heavily despite Carmen's prior consideration of this likely outcome. Leaving behind their home, Miguel's university prospects, her established transportation business, the cost feels momentarily overwhelming. "There might be alternatives," Winters adds, noting Carmen's expression. "Your military background and Javier's connections could potentially create security arrangements outside standard witness protection." But those decisions come after the operation succeeds. Carmen nods, returning her gaze to the desert beyond the window. One challenge at a time, one tactical objective after another. The methodology that guided her through combat zones applies. Equally now, focus on the immediate mission, maintain situational awareness, adapt to changing conditions. Get some rest, Winters advises, setting down her empty mug. Tomorrow begins early. Left alone in the quiet kitchen, Carmen reviews mental checklists developed through years of high-stakes operations, equipment, contingencies, communications. Protocols, extraction routes, each element carefully considered and prepared. Yet beneath the tactical calculations runs the emotional current that distinguishes this operation from any previous mission. Not just her own safety at stake, but Miguel's future, their life together, the world they've carefully built since leaving military service behind. As midnight passes, Carmen finally returns to her room, preparing for a few hours of necessary rest before dawn brings the operation's commencement. On her nightstand sits the worn business card from Javier, the letter from Raul, and a recent photo of Miguel at his science competition. Tangible reminders of the connections worth protecting, the future worth securing regardless of personal risk. Tomorrow she drives back into Los Halcones territory, deliberately engaging the threat that's pursued them across borders. Dangerous, certainly. Necessary, absolutely. Carmen Vasquez settles onto the bed, her resolve crystallizing into the calm focus that precedes decisive action. Whatever Vega and his organization have planned, they're about to discover that underestimating a former military intelligence officer with everything to protect represents their most significant tactical error. These hospital contracts would be valuable cover for cartel operations, Winters observes. Medical equipment shipments receive priority processing and less intensive scrutiny at border crossings. Perfect conduit for contraband. You think they wanted to compromise my legitimate deliveries? It fits their evolving methodology, the agent explains. Rather than smuggling through remote desert crossings, they're increasingly piggybacking on legitimate commercial operations. Less risk, better disguise. Carmen processes this assessment, connecting additional dots. My fast program certification would make my trucks especially valuable. Expedited processing at all border crossings between Mexico and the United States. Exactly, Winters confirms. And your military background might have made you particularly interesting. Someone with security clearance history and established cross-border credentials represents a high-value target for infiltration. The revelation shifts Carmen's understanding of the entire confrontation. Not random harassment, but targeted recruitment disguised as extortion. When direct coercion failed, Vega escalated to intimidation and surveillance, unwilling to abandon such a potentially valuable asset. This changes our approach, Winters says, reorganizing her files. If they want your transportation credentials, rather than simply punishing defiance, they'll likely attempt to compromise you rather than eliminate you. Pressure points, leverage, coercion. Miguel, Carmen says immediately, potentially, which makes our protective custody doubly important. Winter's phone buzzes with an incoming message. She reviews it quickly, her expression shifting. Our surveillance team reports increased Los Halcones activity near the border. Multiple vehicles moving north from Santa Elena toward Nogales. Includes known associates of Vega. Timing suggests they're pursuing leads connected to our departure from Tucson, Carmen observes. Agreed. I'll increase security rotation here and notify our border teams. Winters sends rapid instructions through her secure communication channel, then returns to their analysis. We need to transition from reactive to proactive measures. If they're this determined to access your transportation routes, we can potentially use that interest against them. You're suggesting using me as bait again, Carmen notes without accusation. I'm suggesting leveraging their interest to expose their network and operational patterns, Winters clarifies. Controlled engagement under comprehensive security protocols. Their strategic discussion continues late into the evening, working through various approaches and contingencies. Carmen's military intelligence background proves valuable, allowing her to engage with Winters as a tactical partner rather than merely a protected witness. They develop the framework for an operation that would appear to offer Los Halcones what they want: access to Carmen's cross-border transportation routes, while actually creating a monitored channel for gathering evidence against their organization. Around midnight, Miguel emerges from his room, finding them surrounded by maps and documents spread across every available surface. You should get some rest, he tells Carmen, concern evident in his expression. Just finishing up, she assures him, suddenly aware of the hours that have passed. How's the project coming along? Made some design refinements, Miguel answers, pouring himself water from the kitchen pitcher. The university database access is working perfectly. Winters begins gathering her files. We'll continue tomorrow. My team will brief you on preliminary security protocols in the morning. After the agent departs to the security command post in the property's converted garage, Carmen joins Miguel at the kitchen counter. The normalcy of the moment, mother and son having a late-night conversation in a comfortable kitchen, contrasts sharply with their circumstances. Remember, telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you're enjoying the Cartel crossing, please subscribe to our channel. It means so much to us. Following Carmen's dangerous standoff with Los Halcones isn't just about the thrill. It's about witnessing how courage and quick thinking can transform even the most threatening situations. Whether you're connecting with Carmen's determination to protect her son or admiring her strategic mind, your support helps us bring more powerful stories like this to life.